Hi, I'm Reed Holson. Welcome to CityLink's Directions, where we sit down with our directors of the City of Sioux Falls. All 11 departments, not of course in this episode, but we're proud to announce that Shawn Pritchett is here. He's our new finance director for the City of Sioux Falls. Shawn, we welcome you to Directions and CityLink.
I appreciate that. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and welcome to the City of Sioux Falls, too.
Thanks.
So we want to get to know you. So tell us about where you came from, how long you've been in Sioux Falls, and what was your previous job?
Okay. Well, I grew up not far from Sioux Falls, but just on the other side of the border, and I was a farm family, farm kids. So always felt a part of this community because this is where we kind of came to do a lot of our shopping, and it was kind of our regional center. When I was working in the Twin Cities after graduate school, my wife was just graduating from graduate school, and we had decided that we wanted to move back to Sioux Falls, be closer. We had just had our first daughter, and we wanted to be closer to family. Grandparents were here, but just wanted to raise our kids in a smaller community than the Twin Cities, something safer, somewhere where they would have opportunities as well. And so we moved back about 16 years ago now, and have been here ever since.
And so before you came to the Sioux Falls, what job did you hold before you came here?
Worked in a couple of positions. So when I was in graduate school up in the Twin Cities, I worked for it was an interstate compact, Midwest Higher Education Commission, and so that's where I kind of got introduced to insurance and risk management, which isn't a direct function of my current employment here at the City of Sioux Falls, but gives me a lot of perspective on those because they are a key part of what we do here and have financial impacts as well. So I ran a risk management program there for several years. I also worked for the Minnesota Supreme Court for a couple of years before moving back to Sioux Falls.
So finance, what makes you so interested in finance to become a finance director for government?
Always been interested in finance since I was in graduate school, and I've done a lot of different types of finance over time. When I was back in Sioux Falls here, I worked a lot in economic development, community development. That always has kind of a financial component as part of that. But also I did a lot with business development and making loans, worked in banking, so made loans to small businesses, so got to learn how small businesses ran. And then prior to coming to the Sioux Falls here, I was 4 years with Costello Property Management here in Sioux Falls, where I served as Chief Operating Officer. So in that role, oversaw a lot of the financial components of that particular entity, but also oversaw their property management as well, and all of the various properties that they were presently managing in 4 states.
A lot of us may think of a finance department, well, it's just accounting,
Right.
But it's much, much more than that, isn't it?
It is. Yep. There's a lot of functions that we help. I mean, we're a support-driven organization where we are working with the departments on how we can best provide public goods and services. And so we're always trying to find ways to be more effective and efficient in that. And there are just finances drive every part of the city and the ability of us to provide services. And so we really are key to helping with the departments be successful in what they're doing. But also, we also need to be helpful in forecasting what type of revenues we're going to be generating for the city to support those type of activities as well.
Let's break down the finance department a little bit because it's more, we have accountants, we've got finance people, finance managers, but there's other areas that you're focusing on, like procurement, which is purchasing.
Correct. So we do all of the general accounting functions for the city, so handling all of that back office type of pieces, and right now we're closing out the year for 2018 and preparing now that we're going into 2019. But we have a lot of different other core functions that we operate out of our department. So we have about 30 employees. And some of the areas that we're most thought of or are known for is going to be on the budget or the CIP side. So right now we're gearing up on the budget piece of the process for the city, and that's developing the budget for the city, working in conjunction with the departments as well as the mayor's office, establishing priorities for the city and what will all be incorporated into that budget. We have a capital improvements program, and that's like a 5-year outlook on what we're going to spend on major items for the city, whether that's a building or a piece of equipment. So all that is factored into the CIP or the capital improvements program. So we manage that process and develop that, working in conjunction with the other departments here at the city. But we also handle all of accounts payable. So as there are encumbrances for the city that need to be paid, we facilitate that as well. If we're going out and borrowing money, we're issuing bonds, we will be involved in administering that process. We provide educational components, so we're educating the council and our other stakeholders on how the city is doing financially, what our expectations are for revenues, where our balances are, where we are at in terms of our budget. We also have centralized purchasing functions, and so we handle all of the bid requirements, meeting within the state guidelines for bids, but also handling a lot on the agreements and contract side. So working in conjunction with the departments and the city attorney's office on handling and facilitating those agreements that we have for a variety of services that we are providing or securing for on behalf of the city. Another thing that we do that I don't think most people are aware of is we also administer the city's entertainment venues. So we're the contract administrator for those facilities, and so there are 5 or 6 facilities that we have here. That would include the Orpheum, the T. Denny Sanford Premier Center, the Convention Center, the Arena, the Washington Pavilion, and the Birdcage Baseball Stadium. So as a contract administrator, we oversee each of those facilities. They each have their own third-party administrator that actually runs those facilities on a day-to-day basis, but those are all city-owned assets, and so we manage them from a capital improvements perspective as well as overseeing the contracts that are utilized to manage those facilities.
All with 30 employees.
All with 30 employees.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Let's talk about purchasing, in fact, because the city is 11 departments. It's like 11 mini divisions or businesses. The city purchases tons of equipment and salt and all kinds of things. What does that look like? I mean, how do we go about purchasing the goods and services that we need to do the citizens' business of the government?
Well, it depends on what we happen to be purchasing. So certain things are required to be bid, and so if they're going out, they'll do bid publications, and then we will solicit bids and we'll receive the bids in, and then we'll work with the department on a selection of the bid that would be approved and moved forward with. But there's also other things that don't necessarily have to be bid, like professional services, but we'll work with the departments in developing those relationships and also securing different professional services on behalf of the city. A lot of it is, with purchasing, the nice thing about having it centralized is you do develop a technical expertise in it, and so having it centralized is helpful because our purchasing people build that skill set to know how can we leverage the most cost-effective strategy for acquiring items that the city may need. And so they're able to do that in a centralized function and help all of our departments minimize the costs when they're doing that and help keep costs down. And if something comes in that is outside of what we had anticipated would be the cost, they're also very good at thinking very creatively about how we might go about doing it in a different way. Whether that means we're not going to hire a vendor to do the entire project. We may go directly and try to buy things wholesale and then contract out specifically to vendors to install. So there's different ways that you can handle procurement, and because they're doing this on a day-to-day basis, they have built up that expert knowledge on how to do it.
And Shawn, on your staff, you've got business analysts that are really key players in each of the departments, actually kind of act as a business advisor to help the department stay on track in their spending and their expenses and also look strategically to the future.
Yes, so they're constantly interacting, communicating back and forth with our various departments, tracking how they're doing relative to their budgets and what had been anticipated, but also helping them anticipate what's coming forward. So, and in times helping them think differently about how they might provide certain types of goods and services or how they handle their daily operations. So, but we are a support-driven organization, so we're always very careful of not managing for them, but being a support network. And sometimes that means challenging things that they may be doing. I always like to be challenged because it helps me reiterate that, why we do things a certain way. And so this just brings in some additional individuals that are working across departments, seeing what's happening in other departments and helping provide that feedback to those departments and how we might be able to do things best. And so we hope that the departments find us as a valuable tool for them as they kind of go about their daily, trying to do what they're doing in terms of providing those goods and services to the public here in Sioux Falls.
And how important is the management information systems or the computer aspect of it that helps the departments and these business analysts keep track of where they're at? I mean, the city's become much more sophisticated in that in the past few years.
Correct. Exactly. You know, as we are constantly looking at other ways we can use technology to enhance what we're doing. Recently, and we are in the process of implementing an asset management software. So being able to, in one place, manage all of the assets throughout the city. And we are unique because those assets might be a building, but it might be a road. And so there's so many different ways that you can try to account for those. But also then utilizing that software to say, okay, we know when this asset is going to reach the end of its useful life, and that will help us in the planning of when it needs to be replaced. It also helps us in terms of maintaining those assets over time, so we can be very consistent and proactive about maintaining those assets so that those investments that we do make, they last as long as possible. And so those information technology pieces are really critical for that. We've done that with the financial software that's been installed because we are a very complex entity with many different departments and so many different employees. So we have almost a $500 million budget. And so you can imagine the complexities that go along with that. So having that information available to you to make good and solid decisions is really key. And also tracking where we're at as we go through the budget year.
I think this asset management software too is going to be almost a safety thing, because we'll track things like street signs and lights and all those types of things, not only to be more efficient from a finance aspect, to make sure that those things are replaced when they need to be replaced.
Exactly, and it'll have a components to it where the citizens of our city can be helpful as well. So as they're reporting things, of whether it's potholes or it's street lights out, that all that information comes into that system and it's able to generate work orders, and we're able to send people out to address those more quickly.
Yeah, it's really exciting, the innovation that's happening with the city of Sioux Falls and continuing to do so. Well, let's talk about the budget before we take a break, because sometimes many citizens go, it's so complicated, I just can't figure it out. So can you piece it out for us? Because there's a first penny, there's a second penny, there's the CIP you talked about, the capital improvements plan. So break it down for us so we can understand it.
Okay. Well, you know, something separate from city government is that we used fund budgeting. So I kind of think of this a little bit like when I was several years ago, I used to do the Dave Ramsey, where I put money into different envelopes, and those envelopes would be used for different purposes. That's a little bit like what fund budgeting is like. We're actually setting aside that fund is for a specific purpose, and then we look at how much we have spent and what the balance is at the end of the month or at the end of the year. So the first penny that we have from a tax perspective goes to our general fund. So our general fund covers those day-to-day operating activities of the city. So everything that is not covered by another fund in the city is essentially covered through the general fund. So whether that's paying for public safety, for our police, for our fire, for various other facets, for my department and so forth, just the general administration of the city government, that would come out of the general fund. And so that first penny is dedicated to that purpose. But that fund is also supported by the property taxes that we receive. So we receive a portion of the property taxes that each of the taxpayers pay in the city of Sioux Falls, in addition to the school district in the county. So we have a portion, and that portion generally will go toward paying for the general fund. What we think of as the second penny that people have for sales taxes, that's dedicated to the sales and use tax fund. And that fund supports capital improvements. So as a city, we are dedicating that money to paying for those big dollar projects, whether it's a new street that happens to be going in, or if it's a new fire hall or fire station that's going to be built, or it's additional equipment that we need for the fire department or for the police force. That will all come out of that capital improvements program, or the sales and use tax fund from that perspective. Then we have a third penny, and that is charged just on specific items. So whether that's lodging, restaurant meals, and beverages. And so that penny is dedicated to our entertainment tax fund, and that is utilized to support those entertainment tax venues that I had talked about a little bit earlier. So they help support improvements that we might be making to the Washington Pavilion. If we are replacing the wall out front of whether it's the retaining wall out front of the Washington Pavilion, or we're replacing the sound system in the convention center, those dollars help to support that and to make sure that those assets continue to be effective for our community going forward, because we've made a major investment in those assets and we want to make sure that they're being maintained, and that we also have the opportunity to have we have good technology that makes those facilities attractive for people to utilize.
Then we have our enterprise funds, like
Yes.
lots of talk lately about the water reclamation plant and how that's going to be funded, their expansion.
Correct. So we have 5 enterprise funds, and they're a little bit different. So think of them almost like small businesses within our own budget for the city. So they represent a type of public good where we can actually tell how many people are using and what they're using the system for. So if I were to give you a comparison, so water is an enterprise fund. Using the highways and streets is not, because it's very difficult to track how much people benefit from and utilize the highways or the streets that we are paying for. So those are paid for through our second penny, sales and use tax, as well as maintenance, repairs, and so forth that are done through the general fund. Enterprise funds, again, are different because we can tell who is benefiting from them, and we try to set up fee models that will appropriate how much revenue we receive and the fees that we charge based on how people use the system. And so with those, we have the 5 enterprise funds that we manage, which are typically handled out of public works, which you'd have your water fund, your water reclamation fund. You have electric and light. So we are an electrical provider for a portion of Sioux Falls, like Xcel Energy or like Southeastern Electric. So we have some portion of that electric as well. We have a public parking fund, so that is to support, we charge parking fees, and those support the development of parking primarily downtown in terms of the parking garages that we have here. And then we have the landfill, and the landfill is a little bit different in that it's a regional landfill as well, and so we do work with outlying areas that also utilize the landfill, and they support themselves through the collection of fees from our garbage haulers or those people that are bringing things out to the landfill.
Wow, that's a lot. It is a lot, and if you're interested in finding out more about that and the budgets and how it works before we take a break and come back and talk about the budget season that's coming up, just go to our website at siouxfalls.org, click on departments, and go to the finance department. Everything Shawn's been telling you about is right there, and you can take a look at where we're at in the city of Sioux Falls. We'll be right back on Directions.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jensen from Falls Community Health, here today to talk about Legionella. Legionella is a bacteria that can cause community-acquired pneumonia. Legionella presents like any other pneumonia with progressive cough and fever. It is often underrecognized and underdiagnosed. You are at greatest risk for Legionella causing pneumonia if your age is greater than 50, you are a current or former smoker, have COPD, are immunocompromised, or have other underlying illnesses. People contract Legionella by water droplets in the air from contaminated air conditioning systems, decorative fountains, or hot tubs. If you have any questions about Legionella, contact your primary care physician or Falls Community Health.
Welcome back to CityLink and Sioux Falls Directions. Our guest is Shawn Pritchett, our new finance director with the city of Sioux Falls. He's got a lot to do with his 30 employees, making sure that the city's finances are in order, and of course in good service to all of us as citizens of the city of Sioux Falls. Shawn, let's talk about the budget process. So here you start with the city and boom, you're right in the fire with the budgeting process for 2020 now already. It's unbelievable. So new administration, new finance director, new approach for finance and budgeting?
We will do some new approach to the budgeting process and really trying to expand upon the success we've had in the past with the budget. So overall, I think the citizens of this community can be proud of the fact that we have a strong financial background infrastructure to this city. We've relied a lot on balance and making sure that we balance our wants and needs. We balance the things that we have invested in and really been very prudent, I think, about the resources that we've spent in the past. So when we start this budget cycle, this will be the first one really that this mayor has 100% kind of involvement in from the very beginning, because we are January right now, and we will introduce the capital improvements program in final form by the end of June. We will introduce the overall budget by the end of July. So the CIP component, that's the part where we're investing in the buildings and the equipment and so forth. That's the first piece that comes out, and that's a 5-year plan. So we put that together. So we already have, essentially this preliminary plan that we had already set up. So we're working on 2020 right now. We have this preliminary plan that's already been kind of set up for 2020 and what that looks like. But we will be looking at, okay, what happens in that 5th year out? And then you're always tweaking and you're always kind of changing what's going to be planned in those next 5 years. different parks improvements, different public works infrastructure improvements. You're always kind of reassessing that. Each of the departments is always looking in that to determine, okay, has something moved up as a higher priority that needs to be dealt with immediately? And so they're going to be looking at that CIP plan as we have in the past and developing the new CIP plan that will move forward for the next 5 years. So that will be the first piece that is finalized. And then you'll have the what we'll call the budget, or the general operating budget for the entire community. And that will be inclusive of what we plan to spend for capital improvements this year, but then it will have everything else that the city spends money on and will be incorporated into the budget for this year, whether it's enterprise funds or general operating funds as well. Some of the things that we're going to look at a little bit differently this year is how we allocate, or how we develop our priorities for new funds that we're going to be. What new things will we be funding in this year? And one thing that we looked at and working with the mayor's office on is, really how do we take what we want to spend money on in the next year, the new things that we want to be funding, and how do we align that to the goals of the department, because each of the department has developed, 2 big audacious goals that it wants to see accomplished. So how do we make sure that the new things that we're funding are related to and will help move those forward, or how will those items really meet one of the core components of the One Sioux Falls initiative, which really focuses on 4 different areas. It's engaging the public, it is workforce development, safety and health, and housing. And those have been kind of the 4 key areas for the administration of really looking at how do we move those pieces forward. So as we look at the new dollars that are spent this year, we want to see how do we make sure that those funds are really going to prioritize those core areas. But we also want to look at other things. We want to look at how do we ensure that the things that we're doing, the new initiatives that we're going to be funding, are going to be measurable? Are they going to have an impact? And what is that impact going to be? What are we identifying that impact is going to be? Are we going to move the needle? Not just focusing on milestones or doing something, but actually focusing on how we change, what it is we want to accomplish, and how we're going to measure and hold ourselves accountable to that. The other things we want to do as part of the budget process this year is really how do we engage people? How do we engage the departments to work together more collectively and really think how can we be better at doing this particular function if we're working across departments? In addition to engaging the public and saying to the public, okay, what are you seeing? What do you think are your priorities as well? And how do we gather that information, not just in a generic public forum, but how do we be purposeful in actually engaging them and add on to our process? So we have kind of a layout that we're going to be moving forward with that really is going to engage our departments to really focus on those key areas.
Very interactive process. Now, once you get down to where you have a plan, before you get that plan, I'm sure it's quite competitive across the city departments. As you said before, there's some tough choices that need to be made because we can't fund everything.
Correct. There is a limited number of dollars, and depending on what our forecast will show in terms of what we will be getting for property tax revenue, what we will be supporting with sales tax growth in the future, based upon that, we have to make some decisions about what is available for spending on new initiatives. In addition to the fact that it may not just be new initiatives, but are there different ways we could be doing things? So one of the ways that departments can submit some of their proposals will be, if you're going to change the way you're doing business. So maybe you're going to save money on using contract vendors by adding an FTE employee, or you're going to be changing the way our employees interact to be more efficient, and that will reduce our expenses over here. So that's, it's not just about the new funds that we have available, but how do you be more efficient? How might that proposal be more efficient in reallocating existing resources that we have? The second thing I would say is, and a big piece of how we're going to evaluate those budget priorities as they come in, is what kind of partnerships are you facilitating? So are you working with the private sector? Are you working with other nonprofits? And are we working across departments? And so partnerships is going to be a key function of how we prioritize things. Are we stretching ourselves? Because we have an ability to support and leverage outside and external resources. How are we going to do that? And those priorities will be established in part by how they're able to show those partnerships exist.
So as the process moves on, then obviously goes in front of the city council. There's input from the public there. The public, as you said, will have a chance to have some input through the process.
Correct.
So we're looking at presenting the CIP or the Capital Improvement Project budget first to the council, correct? And then the general budget comes after that?
It will be introduced, and then there will be a series of budget hearings that will occur in August. And then in September, typically is a time frame where the city council will do its first and second hearing and adoption of the actual budget at that time. So it is, if we're starting in January now, you're talking about an 8-9 month long process to get to that set. But the public will be engaged as part of the public hearing, but our goal is to also engage them as part of our own internal administrative consideration of what those priorities are. And we've talked about ways that, one, we can go out to the public and get their feedback on what they see as priorities or what their dreams for Sioux Falls are, in addition to maybe having a citizens panel that will help us prioritize or give us some feedback on how we prioritize things that we will be including in as new initiatives within the budget.
Shawn, before we go, let's talk about the health of our local economy. How are things going? I mean, how's the sales tax level coming, and how do we look as far as growth, continued growth, go to fund all these initiatives?
So far, 2018, we're just starting to close out, and we're seeing kind of the final numbers coming in for the city. Overall, 2018 was a strong year. When 2018 was budgeted, which is before my time coming to the city, we had anticipated a 1% increase in sales tax revenue this year. We had estimated a 1% increase in the entertainment tax for this year. And that was done, a year and a half prior to that, because we had seen significant slowdowns in sales tax. It appears that we are about will be about 4.5% increase in 2018 and about 4.8% on the entertainment tax. And I would tell people that is before audited figures come out. So there's certain sales tax audited, but that is the just general receipts that we've received on for the sales tax and the entertainment tax dollars. So we exceeded what our expectations were for this year, which helps us move along what the expectation was for 2019, which was 3% on both accounts. And so we're well on our way to meeting that goal as well for 2019, excuse me. And then we're going to take a look at what we're going to project for 2020, and we'll be watching those sales tax receipts, particularly in the first 3 months of this year, as we estimate what that forecast will be. But overall, we've been very solid, but I think we also maintain kind of a conservative viewpoint on what we're going to project, at what that growth will be going forward. Overall, our economy is extremely strong here in Sioux Falls. We've had another year with building permits, setting records. And so we have lots of construction going on in this community. We continue to see growth. We see growth in population and so forth. So from that standpoint, everything remains very strong here. As I've said to the council when we've done some of our council financial presentations, we continue to express concerns about the nature of the ag economy, which is struggling. If you look at the dollars that revenue income for the farm economy here in South Dakota is down so significantly from where it was 3 or 4 years ago. And even though people may think we're insulated from that, we still have some impact because there are so many people that come out from outside of Sioux Falls and support our retailers, they support our restaurants, they support our entertainment venues, that we still rely upon that. And so we'll continue to watch that very closely as well and what impact that might have for us.
Well, Shawn Pritchett, welcome to the City of Sioux Falls.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your appointment. We look forward to a fun budget year with you and your staff.
Thank you.
All right. You want to find out more about Shawn and what his staff is doing for the budget or how the city's finances work? Go to SiouxFalls.org, click on Departments, and go to the Finance Department. Also a good place for you to watch the programming here at CityLink as well, too. Same thing, go to SiouxFalls.org and click on CityLink. I'm Reed Holson. Thank you again for watching Directions, and we'll see you next time.